Okay guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about the Minoans, so really excited. This video took a while to make, so I'm just super happy and proud to share it with you guys right now. Okay, so we're going to start with a basic overview of the Minoans. So the Minoan civilization lasted roughly 2,000 years, from around 3000 BC to 1000 BC. It was the first civilization in Europe, which is very impressive, of course. And proper urban settlements only really appeared sort of around 2000 BC. So before that, it was a much more sort of loose society, I guess we could say. And then they started to decline around 1500 BC, 15th century BC. And we'll talk about why that happened later. So Minoan society. Actually, very little is known about Minoan society, mainly just because it was so long ago and there are very few remains. It's possible, however, that there was some form of social stratification, as archaeology has shown. Minoan society was kind of structured around different families, different tribes, that sort of thing. And so this raised the prospect for certain families to get ahead, and so inevitably many families became very prominent. There was probably a monarchy. You might recall King Minos in mythology. And the Minoans built palaces. So these were not only the royal residents, but they also performed a variety of other roles, as we're going to see. So there are many different centres for Minoan society. What I should say is that Minoan society wasn't unified. It consisted of many different centres, and the most prominent of these centres were Knossos, Phaistos, Malia, and Katozakros. So the Minoan palaces were quite an impressive feature of Minoan civilization. They served administrative and religious roles principally, but of course they were also the residence of the monarch. So the monarch would have certain quarters within the palace. As I'm going to talk about later, these palaces were huge, so there was definitely enough room. Because of these different roles that the palaces served, scholars tend to use the word palace complex rather than simply palace, just because it was so vast. It wasn't really just a singular building. As a result, the palace complex had many different areas and rooms. So it had storerooms, it had theatres to, watch performances, storerooms where, grain would be kept, as well as possibly wine and other foodstuffs. These Minoan palaces, as I alluded to earlier, really were vast, and in fact some were built up to 5 stories high. One distinctive feature of Minoan palaces were their Minoan columns. These columns were actually made from sort of upturned cypress trees, and were quite an interesting part of Minoan palaces because they differ significantly to the columns used in Mycenaean Greece. Minoan palaces were really quite ornate, and they were decorated with frescoes, which were essentially sort of wall paintings, and we're going to get onto their iconography and that sort of stuff later. Sort of the centerpiece of the Minoan palace was the throne room. The throne room was sort of where the seat of the monarch kind of was. Although ambiguously, there have been theories that it was also sort of an area for the worship of particular deities. So here are a few images that I thought I'd share with you that that really sum up the different roles and characteristics of a Minoan palace. This is, by the way, all relating to the Minoan palace in Knossos, which is really the most elaborate of all of them. So from left to right, top to bottom, we've got a large rendering of a Minoan palace. As you can see, it was sort of centered around a court. I mean, it's really just vast, made up, kind of higgledy-piggledy if you look at it from here. But you do just sort of get get a sense for the scale of the building. On the right, we've got some pithoi, which were the vases that you'd probably see in the storerooms that we just mentioned, probably containing different foodstuffs. As I'm going to get onto later, the Minoans were really big on trade, and so that would become an important part of the Minoan economy. Bottom left, we have quite a nice fresco of some griffins. That's actually the throne room, although PowerPoint has been a bit annoying, so we can't actually see the throne, but it is what it is. So, bottom right, we've got the palace at Knossos in real life. It's obviously been rebuilt. That's not actually the original, but it still gives a sense of how sort of ornate it was. I mean, you can see that you could just about see the sort of the bull in the wall painting, which was a key motif. Okay, so we're now going to be going on to some of the scripts that the Minoans used, and in particular Linear A. Linear A was the form of writing used by the Minoans from around 1850 BC to 1400 BC. It remains undeciphered, but nevertheless, what we can draw from it is that it highlights the sophistication of Minoan society. I mean, the fact that they had their own system of writing really does shed light on how developed they were as a society. So it's pre-Hellenic, obviously, because they didn't have too much interaction with the Greeks. And it was connected to Linear B. So Linear B has been deciphered, notably by Michael Venturus in the 20th century. Linear B is effectively just an adapted version of Linear A, which was used by the Mycenaeans, but only adopted. It wasn't actually introduced by the Mycenaeans. The Minoans introduced it, and it was then adopted by the Mycenaeans when they invaded Crete. Linear B and Linear A, both scripts were used for kind of administration of the society, and so it really helps us ancient historians and archaeologists to find out more about what society really was like. We've discovered over 4,000 tablets, an impressive number to be honest, and that's helped us big time. So here on the left we had a Linear A tablet, and on the right we have a Linear B tablet. So obviously they kind of look crazy to us now, but believe it or not, that is what they used. So trade. Minoans actually had a lot of contact with other cultures. There was a sort of huge seafaring culture in Minoan civilization. I mean, in fact, they really prided themselves on their vast navy, and it really was vast for ancient standards. They exported foodstuffs and pottery to different islands in the Aegean, as well as other places in the other centres in the Mediterranean, such as Egypt and Cyprus. And in return, they would get things like copper, which they got from Attica, and ivory, which they got from Egypt. Fresco painters were also highly sought after, and they travelled around the Mediterranean, sort of selling their abilities. Again, this idea of trade adds to the level of sophistication of Minoan culture, and in particular how sort of developed they were as a society. So here we have a image which kind of quite well demonstrates all the trade routes that Minoan civilization was connected with. You see how it was connected with the far-flung parts of the Mediterranean, including places like Sardinia. So we're going on to Minoan art. So there was actually a huge market for Minoan art, and in particular Minoan pottery. There were different categories of pottery, obviously. You know, the Minoans created pottery for libations, which you may recall is the ritual pouring of liquids to the gods. You had pottery for storage. We've already come across the pithoi, which were used to store foodstuffs. But of course, you also had pottery that was used for just simply display. All these categories had remarkably complex iconography for the time. A particularly common sort of image was nature. The Minoans loved sort of nature and the sea and, you know, marine biology and that sort of stuff. So there were loads of images of sea and nature on their pottery. There was also a culture of the minor arts, and in particular the making of jewellery, figurines, and metal vessels. Frescoes we've already come across a number of times, and these were wall paintings, again with images of sea and nature, that really added to the ornate nature of the Minoan palaces. All art forms, however, whether they're frescoes, pottery, or the minor arts, all seem to display the Minoan love of nature, and we'll see a few examples of that in the next slide. There was a great use of colour, and that added to the ornateness. So here on the left we have a vase depicting an octopus. As I said, the Minoans love nature and depicting animals, so here we've got obviously a marine animal, an octopus. And on the right we've got a bull leaping in the air. A bull leaping was actually a very, very common motif in Minoan art, and this is just the most famous example of that. I mean, you can see just how ornate the fresco is, the sort of the deep blue contrasted with the sort of orangey colour of the bull. So now we're going to go on to the decline and demise of the Minoans. The demise seems to start sort of in the middle of the 15th century BC, when there's archaeological evidence of destruction, we think because of maybe a fire, but that's just one among many different theories. Perhaps also another theory is the rise of the Mycenaeans in mainland Greece, which may likely be a cause. In addition, another theory put forward is the volcanic activity in the area, and particularly in some Aegean islands, but also other natural phenomena may be the cause, including earthquakes and other phenomena. In addition, there might have been some internal havoc within Minoan society, which of course might have contributed to its decline. However, in my opinion, it's probably a combination of all these different factors, and it's very sad for me to relate that they ultimately vanished from the face of the earth in 1200 BC, when their centres, in particular Knossos, were abandoned. Thank you for watching. Thank you guys for watching. As always, stay tuned for more videos. I loved making this video and I can't wait to make some more. Thank you.